The Seattle Seahawks have doubled down on their impressive and, let's be honest, surprisingly good offensive performance last year. The Legion of Boom has become the Legion of Zoom, but the mastermind Pete Carroll is still behind all of it, and I think it could be leading to a very special season for the Hawks. Last offseason, before we all knew what Geno had become, the Seahawks had traded away their franchise quarterback for a haul of draft picks and potentially their temporary starter in Drew Lock. Some fans had even convinced themselves that he was really good or even better than Russell Wilson, who they had traded away, but it was very clear, very quickly, that was not going to be the long-term answer in Seattle. I remember reading the articles during training camp last year about Geno Smith looking impressive in training camp and thinking to myself, there's no way that they'll actually start Geno, right? I mean, this guy had a career record as a starter of 13-21. He was deemed third-string quarterback behind Ryan Fitzpatrick and Bryce Petty while he was in New York. He'd thrown 34 touchdowns to 37 interceptions in his first 8 seasons. To anyone who said they saw this coming, just stop. There was nothing in the stats or on the film to suggest that he could come out and put on the performance that he did last season. So first, statistically, he completed nearly 70% of his passes for 4,200 yards and a whopping 30 touchdowns to just 11 interceptions, beating every full season and per game metric of his entire career to that point by miles. Then, he also ran for over 350 yards and another touchdown, so he checked all the boxes there. It was good enough for him to win Comeback Player of the Year, and he even received votes for MVP. Needless to say, the rise of Geno Smith ensured that the Seahawks won the trade with the Broncos hands down. We won't go into it about how the Broncos fared last season. That's for another video. So the Seahawks were able to win 9 games, sneak into the playoffs, and yeah, they lost in the wildcard round, but entering the season, experts were projecting them to be picking in the top 10 and searching for their next franchise quarterback. Well, they did pick in the top 10, but it was with the aforementioned Broncos selection. And they appear to have figured out the quarterback situation for the next few years based on Geno's new contract. So what's next? How do you improve on a surprise playoff appearance? Well, you draft incredibly well, sign some big-time free agents, and pay your quarterback to show him you've got confidence in him for the future. First, the draft picks. The Seahawks ended up with 2 picks in the top 20 and managed to come away with arguably the best player at 2 different positions that also fill needs. First, Devin Witherspoon, the insanely competitive, tough-as-nails cornerback from Illinois. When the draft process started, he was sitting at the 2nd or 3rd best DB available. But through the combine, pro days, and individual workouts, every single mock draft started to have Witherspoon rising. He's not the biggest guy, but his physical play and elite cover skills made him a top target for the Seahawks in April. He'll fill in immediately alongside their surprise 6th-rounder from last year, Tariq Woolen, who was a candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I'd say their corner position is set for the foreseeable future. Then at pick 20, the Seahawks selected the most talented wide receiver in the draft, Jackson Smith-Njigba. He has good size at 6'1", with decent speed running a 4.5 40, but his hands and elite route running are what separate him from the rest of the pack. JSN comes from Ohio State, where he's used to playing with other elite talent at his position, so stepping into a receiver room with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett won't be a big deal. His presence will allow Pete Carroll and company to get creative with formations and move each of the receivers inside or out based on coverages and matchups. Smith-Njigba is a perfect mix of Metcalf and Lockett and will likely be used primarily in the intermediate routes and over the middle, while the 2 current stars continue to do what they do deep downfield and in the screen game. The rest of their draft was used to build depth along the lines and add some young talent to the running back room, 2 things you can never have too much of. The front office has truly mastered the art of roster building. They're rarely down for long, always bouncing back quickly, usually with a first-place finish in the division. Part of that roster building is taking advantage of free agency. This offseason, the Seahawks did just that. They really needed to address their defense, which was coming off the worst performance this franchise has seen since 2010. They ranked 25th in the league in points allowed and 26th in yards. Their 2 biggest signings come at the linebacker position. First, they brought in Devin Bush. Bush was 3rd in voting for Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2019. He then missed most of 2020 with a torn ACL, didn't really get back to form in 2021, and had his 5th-year option declined by the Steelers prior to last season. In 2022, though, he played the best he had since his rookie year. Hitting free agency, the market wasn't incredibly hot, so the Seahawks were able to sign him on a 1-year prove-it deal, and it could work out really well for player and team. Then they brought back their franchise, future Hall of Fame linebacker, and defensive heartbeat in Bobby Wagner. He took a 1-year hiatus to the rival Rams, but wanted to come back home to finish his career and maybe help them get 1 more Super Bowl. He'll be 33 this season, but doesn't appear to have slowed down much at all. He was a 2nd-team All-Pro last year and didn't miss a single game. I don't think the importance of having Wagner back on the team and in the locker room can be overstated. He's a coach and high-level player rolled into one. Lastly, they signed Julian Love from the Giants, a young, super athletic safety who was coming off the best season of his career to help strengthen the back end of the Seahawks defense. All of these additions will make immediate impacts, and I'd suspect get them back into the top half of the league defensively where they belong. So they've added offensive and defensive talent, brought back the hometown hero, and found their franchise quarterback. For any team, that would be a great situation. But remember, they also have a top 5 head coach in the NFL who deserves his recognition. Sure, he had a failed attempt earlier in his coaching career, but ever since arriving in Seattle, Pete Carroll has made this one of the most respected organizations in the league and has them competing year in and year out. He's now made the playoffs with 3 different starting quarterbacks and has coached top 5 offenses and number 1 defenses. His team has gone through several different identities, but the one constant is playing hard and an overall winning culture. I know Seahawks fans feel down in the dumps after not winning their playoff game, but remember, you weren't even supposed to be in the postseason. Things are looking up, and the future is bright in Seattle.